Hi there, and welcome to this day in history for February 2nd. February 2nd is the 33rd day of the year in the Gregorian calendar, with 332 days remaining to the end of the year, unless it's a leap year, in which case there are 333 days remaining to the end of the year. Today's word is quash. Quash is a verb that means to suppress or extinguish summarily and completely, as one might quash a rebellion. Quash may also mean to nullify, especially by a judicial action, as in to quash an indictment. Interestingly, although these two definitions of quash are spelled the same way and have similar meanings, they arrive to us by way of different paths. They both mean essentially to get rid of something, whether it is to quash a rumor or to quash a judicial order, but the legal term quash, meaning to nullify, comes to us through Anglo-French, originally Latin, where it meant to annul or to void. First known use of this meaning is in the 1300s. The other quash, to quash a rebellion or quash a rumor, came through Middle English, Latin before that, where its meanings were more along the line of to smash or to shake. First known use of this meaning is in the 1200s. Same word, similar meanings, different sources of origin. Interesting. Quash. And with that, back in the 16 and 1700s, there were those known as buccaneers, who were kind of what was called a privateer or a free sailor. A young man named Alexander Selkirk was just such a privateer on an expedition in the South Pacific when the ship he was on stopped at an uninhabited island to resupply. Word is that Alexander had some concerns about the seaworthiness of the ship and asked to stay on the island. The captain agreed, but it was a contentious parting. The captain left Alexander on the island and went on. Unfortunately for him and his crew, Alexander was right. The ship foundered a couple hundred miles off the coast of Colombia, and any survivors that there may have been were taken prisoner by the Spanish, with whom the English were at war at the time. But Alexander was all right because he was back on that island, and he had enough in the way of survival skills to survive by hunting and making use of the resources he found on the island. He was there all by himself for 4 years and 4 months until he was rescued on February 2nd, 1709. Stories of his survival were widely published upon his return to England. These stories were the inspiration for the adventure book Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. Groundhog Day. The first Groundhog Day was actually celebrated in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania on February 2nd, 1887. The groundhog tradition posits that the groundhog comes out of its burrow, and if it sees its shadow, it becomes frightened and goes back into its burrow, predicting 6 more weeks of winter. No shadow means an early spring, and I have to say that I always had a couple of thoughts about that. First of all, the sun is shining, but we're going to have 6 more weeks of winter. But if it's dark, no shadow, spring is going to come early in the dark. That always seemed exactly backwards to me. Also, from when I was a little girl, when I first heard about this, I wondered, how do they know what the groundhog saw? Groundhogs can't talk. What if the groundhog was scared because there were all these people looking at him trying to figure out what he saw? In any case, that's their story and they're sticking to it. The tradition stands. They still have something of a public ceremony early in the morning in Punxsutawney with the groundhog on February 2nd of each year. Here's hoping the prediction is favorable and accurate. This is the birthday of singer, songwriter, and musician Graham William Nash, born in England on February 2nd, 1942. He co-founded the Hollies in the early 1960s. He first met David Crosby and Stephen Stills in 1966 when the Hollies were on an American tour, but it would be a couple more years before he would leave the Hollies to join the other two in forming Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Graham Nash wrote Our House, Teach Your Children, Marrakesh Express, and Just a Song Before I Go that were hits for Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And I imagine a good many of my generational contemporaries who might be listening right now have some of those songs playing in their heads, as they are great songs. Graham Nash appears to be still working. Happy birthday, Graham Nash. Gosh, Graham Nash. Between the Hollies, Crosby, Stills and Nash, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and his own solo work, there is quite a body of work. Songs that he's written, co-written, and sung. I have to tell you, though, that when I saw his part in the Hollies, the song that jumped to mind and is still running in my head is On a Carousel by the Hollies. Written by Graham Nash, Alan Clark, and Tony Hicks, and released in February of 1967, this song is considered to be in the psychedelic pop genre, and also happens to be the first Hollies A-side record where Graham Nash sings lead vocals. You can listen for that right at the beginning of the song. On a Carousel reached number 11 on the Billboard Hot 100. On a Carousel by the Hollies. Link in the description. And I think that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for watching. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share this video with a link in your email, messaging, or social media. If you enjoy this series, you can check out the playlist that contains these videos. I'll put a link to that in the description. That playlist lives on YouTube, so for other platforms, I'll include a link to my blog page. It's called No Really. You can also find me on Rumble, BitChute, and Odyssey. All those links in that description. Alrighty, that's all I can think of right now. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.